Kina, who is the best-selling author of Night Swim. And I have to ask you a question. Was that the first book that you wrote?
Well, it's the first book that was entirely my book. The first book that I published was co-written with the founder of Dunkin' Donuts.
I know I'm going to ask you about that a little bit
Yeah.
later. Before we go into the books that you've written, what was it like being Deborah Brilliant in Massachusetts when you were there?
I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, and which is, a somewhat upscale suburb of Boston. And I had a pretty privileged life, really. I used to feel embarrassed about that, but it is what it was. I didn't choose it. I was a child growing up in a nice house. My parents went to, they belonged to a country club. We actually had some live-in maids when I was growing up.
Well,
So,
at that age, most teenagers are either perfect children or wild children. Which
yeah,
category do you fit in?
both.
How?
I think I felt the pressure to be perfect. I could do things well, but then there was that other side of me that just wanted to break that and go do some wild things.
What do you call wild things?
Drugs back in the 70s, smoking pot. In 10th grade, I had 100 and something absences.
So what did you
Um,
do when you cut school?
uh, well, I'm going to go back to we went and smoked pot. In 10th grade, we actually did go around canvassing for a politician at the time. But, hung out with my friends. We went into Boston. And when I was a senior, we would go at night to these gay bars, which was an entirely new world for me. So I was just fascinated with this whole sort of shadow side that I hadn't been exposed to.
Well, you graduated high school a year early and wanted to explore the world. What were you looking for?
I think I wanted to know what was outside my very protected bubble, the country club and the nice neighborhood and even just the Jewish upbringing that I had going to temple. I wanted to see other types of people and how they lived. I had no idea, had no clue.
And what did you discover?
Well, I discovered that lives were very different than what I grew up in. People had very different struggles. Didn't have even, for example, I went cross country in my when I was graduated. I went cross country. I thumbed put my thumb out with my girlfriend, and I was 17, and we ended up in Wyoming, and nobody had ever met a Jewish person, and I think they thought we would have horns and have a lot of hair on our face. I don't know. That was just so bizarre because in Newton there were so many Jewish people that it didn't occur to me how unusual that was. I just didn't have the exposure.
Well, when you had this moment and you realized this, what happened next? How did you feel? What did you do?
Well, I love the question. I became fascinated with, I guess you might say, sort of the dark side of things. I just kept going. I,
Like,
you know,
give me a definition for the dark side of things.
for me, again, I was taking LSD and, like I said, going to the gay bars at night, tripping with two of my girlfriends. What else did we do? Just hitchhiking. I mean, going cross country. That wasn't a dark side. That was, exploratory about our country and all this beautiful sights in California. But I got finally involved in a relationship, a boyfriend, and just opened up my whole just experience with sexuality. I mean, this is again back in the 70s. So I wasn't following a straight line. I graduated early, but then I started college, but then I dropped out of college twice again, and I did a lot of reading on my own. I just didn't follow the usual sort of straight and narrow course of things.
Well, did your family support your interests and encourage that? Or are they saying, "Are you out of your mind?"
Yeah, they out of your mind. Are you out of your mind? And very worried about me because I literally would hole up in my attic and I made a list of all the books I wanted to read, and I would spend literally, not exaggerating, at least 8 hours a day reading the classics. And I spent a whole year doing that. So it was very, they didn't know what I was doing up there. But I was also popping amphetamines, and that kept me up. So I could read even more without sleep. So that wasn't so great, but the reading was fantastic.
Well, by doing all of this reading, what did you learn about things like resilience, second chances, or even finding the beauty in that in the moment right now?
Well, I really learned about resilience from the founder of Dunkin' Donuts. I wrote that book with him. So I almost felt that I was sitting next to someone who had just been through so much in life and had accomplished so much at a young age. But I think from the reading, I saw, a lot of characters get into trouble, and then, some of them don't get out of trouble. I mean, Anna Karenina doesn't get out of trouble. She takes her own life. That was an option I learned about, and I'm sorry to say that I toyed with that idea for a while. But I just saw hardships in these novels, things that they had to overcome, and that was very inspiring to me. And I would almost adopt their personalities, I think, when I was younger, 17, 18.
Well, since you brought up Dunkin' Donuts, how did you meet William
Is the
Rosenberg?
found it's a curious thing. I was working at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. I was a writer in their communications department, and I was quitting my job because I was going to go write my novel. And my boss said, "Well, I have this one last assignment for you. This guy named Bill Rosenberg just gave $1 million for the cancer ward or whatever. Go interview him for we would do these write-ups of people who would give large gifts. That was part of my job.
Yeah.
So, I went and met this guy, Bill, at this little party at the hospital, and he said, he had this big husky voice, and he said, "Come down and have lunch. Come down." He lived on Cape Cod. So I arranged to have lunch with him. It was about a 2 hour drive from where I lived. And I spent the afternoon with this man, and that's how I met him. And it also turned out that he belonged to the country club where my parents belonged. So my father actually kind of knew him a little bit. So that was a funny coincidence as
Well, what
well.
did you learn from him?
Oh my goodness. I learned about persistence, that if you have an idea, if you believe in an idea, no matter what anybody tells you, how many no's you get, you find a way. You keep going. And he had all these sayings, and he would say, if it didn't happen, it's because someone didn't make it happen. And he just deeply believed that, and he was an example of it. He confronted many obstacles. People did not want to fund his donut shop idea at all. They thought it was ridiculous. So, but we all know that he was quite successful there.
You're a storyteller,
Mhm.
basically. Do you think storytelling has changed? Could it be that our attention span has been so diminished that people don't have the patience to even listen to an elevator pitch?
That's such a great question. I am of two minds. I mean, I hear that a lot. We all have short attention spans and we can only read for 3 seconds. But at the same time, there's still a lot of really great books that have come out that have been popular, that are very long, almost in defiance of that theory. But I do think that narration in books have changed, and you kind of get to the drama maybe a little faster than maybe some of the old time classics that meander more and spend more time with description, things like
Well,
that.
do you think that that improves the story for the storyteller, or does it hinder and force them to get it over with in a hurry? Because in 15 minutes you're going to lose your audience.
Well, I think that could be a danger. I mean, I just believe you have to write the story you have to write, and you shouldn't be thinking about how short or long it is. So if you follow formulas, then you're always in danger of losing an audience, I think.
I think this would be a good moment to give me your elevator pitch for Evening Begins the Day. What would you say?
Okay. Well, this is my new novel. It just came out in March, and it's about two families in crisis. One is dealing with marital infidelity. An emotional affair is different than your typical infidelity.
In what way?
It doesn't involve sex. So the connection between the romantic connection like an emotional connection. It's secret. That's the key word. But it actually doesn't involve sex. And so some people go, oh, so what's the big deal? But in fact, it can be just as harmful as, a
Well, I
sexual.
imagine so. When we get married, we take an oath to fidelity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you break that oath, what does that make the person that broke the oath?
Yeah. Well, that's what I explore in this novel because it happens after in a long marriage. And the main character, Rachel, is like saying, oh my God, I had no idea. And now what? Do I just throw out this relationship? Like, so I explore a lot of that. The other one's dealing with their at-risk teenage daughter, who's probably, at risk of dropping out of high school. And two families end up engaging in this spiritual practice called the counting of the Omer, which is an ancient Jewish practice that's 3,000 years old. And that sort of takes all of them down unique, unusual pathways toward possibly healing and possibly finding a kind of liberation from some of the wounds that have trapped them where they
It's
are.
it sounds fascinating. And if somebody wanted to get a copy, where can they find it?
Anywhere,
What
go
does that
online,
mean?
bookshop.org, Amazon, of course, your favorite indie bookstore, and if they don't have it, just ask them to order it.
The summer's coming up, folks, and everybody looks for good summer reads. This sounds like a good one.
Yeah, thank
I want
you.
to thank you for stopping by today. And it was nice meeting you and getting to know a little bit more about you.